in the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. I've been watching communities wherever I have traveled, especially throughout the state of California, and going into and observing various university settings, business settings, or just small businesses in Los Angeles and in the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area. And what I have observed is that there is definitely a class war taking place in the African American community. Now, I don't mean an aggressive or violent war or conflict between people of different cultures, because when I say community, I should say communities. The African American, more than any other time in its history in the United States, is a pluralistic community. It is a community of different cultures, composed of people who speak different languages. Now, for the first time, there is a direct challenge to the historic black bourgeoisie. Now, that's my observation. And I think it is nationally applicable. Now, that challenge is for their roles in education, in media, in business, and for federal jobs. I remember as an undergraduate at Merritt College on Grove Street, the old campus, reading a book written by the sociologist, the famous sociologist, E.Franklin. The name of that book was The Black Bourgeoisie. In that book, he implicitly forecasted the downfall of the black bourgeoisie. In fact, another implication of his reasoning in his book is that they cannot be sustained. And it is just an act of fortune that they have lasted this long. And of course, because they have been useful to the powers that be, the white supremacist powers that be. Now, his thesis concerning their social orientation was a deep bite at that time. A deep bite which tore into their fragile egos. They looked upon him with scorn. He argued that they are generally superficial people and that they are conspicuous consumers in the marketplaces of America. Their lifestyle is consumerism. They live, he said, in a world of make-believe. Further, he argued that they wallow within the context of a culture not birthed by their own powers, their own creative sentiments, but rather they wallow in a borrowed culture, a culture borrowed from white supremacists, in which their highest aspirations as individuals can only be dreamed at the nod of white power elite, both Democratic and Republican. Dr. Frazier said that their behavior as well as its mentality is a reflection of American morals and American values. Those same morals and values which rationalize the destruction of indigenous people and the enslavement of African Americans, of African indigenous people. He stated that the black bourgeoisie in the United States has been sustained by the crumbs of philanthropy. Now, I heard this week on a popular radio show a representative of the NAACP from Portland, Oregon, making the argument that white people in Portland, in the demonstrations, spurred by the murder of George Floyd, have taken the demonstration off course. My point here to you is that as I listened to him, I realized that he did not know the history of the NAACP, or he purposely suppressed it, because the NAACP was founded by white people, most of whom were Jewish, most of whom were either the children or immigrants from Eastern Europe. And that for at least a decade or more, the leaders of the NAACP, minus Webb Du Bois, were white people. And that even today, the largest donors are white corporations, but for them, the NAACP would have gone bankrupt decades ago. He failed to acknowledge that white people were engaged and are engaged in the activities of the NAACP. So I felt his whole argument was very, very hypocritical. Dr. Frazier went on to say that the black bourgeoisie have shown no interest in the liberation of Negroes except as it has affected their own status or acceptance by the white community. Every African American mainstream organization that dates back to the origin of the NAACP, the Black Urban League, etc., were founded and are today supported by white people, the white power elite. And they have never shown an interest in grassroots liberation struggles by African Americans. Ever. And many of them did not support Dr. Martin Luther King. And I remember that. Many of them called him a troublemaker or tried to suggest that he was a communist. Dr. Frazier, like the great trumpet player Louis Armstrong, when he was writing that book, didn't stop to take a breath between notes, between words, in order to pierce the veil of their illusory place in our social hierarchy and, in fact, in our history. He says of them that they scorned Marcus Garvey, that they showed no interest in the Negro Renaissance of the 30s and 40s and 50s on the East Coast. He said that they want to forget the Negro past. They don't want to identify with slavery. Many of them claim that their ancestry dates to free people, not slaves. So they don't want to identify with the 98% of people of African descent who trace their lineage to suffering and death and oppression, degradation, dehumanization. He states that the black bourgeoisie suffer from nothingness. Emphasis on the word nothingness, that inner emptiness. Because when Negroes attain middle class, he argued, when they get that middle class status, their lives generally lose both content and significance. I said that there is a class war in the black community. You won't hear any strange sounds or screaming. It's not that kind of war. Now, I'm telling you that it will not be won by the black bourgeoisie. The economist and famous sociologist Vilfredo Pareto stated in one of his classic works, The Rise and Fall of Elites, that and I quote, "The history of man is the history of the continuous replacement of elites. As one ascends, another declines," end quote. They are continually fighting to displace one another, to have control of the levers of power, to enrich themselves. One's position in American society cannot be sustained without foresight and power. The black bourgeoisie has no power nor foresight. They never have. But now they are faced with a black elite that does have power. They are those who have no historic ties to slavery here in the United States, no sentimental connections, no popular feelings in the African American community. And I'm not saying they're bad for not having that connection. I'm just saying that it is what it is. Now, their advantage is that they have many cultural facets of power. See, power can be said in many ways. What it really boils down to is this: how much of your intellectual and spiritual and physical energy can be converted into work directed at specific goals, which then you accomplish. That's the measure of power. And they have many facets of it. Underlying those facets of power is their self-interest. They are not worn out like the American black bourgeoisie, who now, like an old whore, is about to be kicked to the curb. But her pimp is telling her, "Baby, you can't make me no money no more. You done lost your looks." They are not passive aggressive in their demonstrations to get capital, education, and political power. No. They get in and take what they want. They intentionally remain sequestered in their religious and cultural orientations within their own families and amongst themselves. They have their cultural festivities, but you won't know where they are unless you're invited. They are not inclined to sing in the master's choir, Old Man River, nor Swing High, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Those songs don't resonate with them. I mean, they don't feel it. So take a good look as we approach November. Take a good look at Biden and take a good look at his list of vice presidential choices. And when you do, understand that you are looking at the last stand of the black bourgeoisie in America. Here is what you should be paying attention to. When the proportion of African and Caribbean immigrants and their descendants rises to and goes above 15% of the black population in the United States, it will be all over for the old black bourgeoisie. My hope is that many of us, those of us who are younger and full of energy to address the issues of justice for descendants of slaves, rise and take their place. But we're going to have to fight our way to that end. We're going to have to fight our way to that end, and that can only be accomplished if we work together, if we organize and work together and manage our resources, what little they may be, in order to overcome the challenges that we face. Concerning the black bourgeoisie, when they disappear, which they will, no one will give them a second thought. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.